Hello, I'm Locke Meredith. I'd like to invite you to join me on my next Legal Lines show with my guest, Betsy Irvine. She owns Yowza Design. You want to build a website? She can tell you how to do it. She's in charge of development and design, but she's also going to tell us about the risks relating to security. So join us on the next Legal Lines with Betsy Irvine.
It's time now for Legal Lines Tips with your host, Locke Meredith.
Hello, I'm Locke Meredith, and I have a Legal Lines tip for you. Remember, knowledge is power. And I want you to know if you're injured and you have lost wages because of that injury, Louisiana law gives you a claim for that loss. Typically, it's going to require medical evidence from a medical doctor stating because of your injuries, you can't work. It's a pretty simple claim. If you had a job before the injury, doc says you can't work from the date of the accident, and 3 months later he says you can work, you can figure out what you've lost in wages. Circumstances occur, however, when the injury results in permanent physical and functional limitations. Now you can't do the job, according to the doctor, that you could do before the accident. So the question becomes, is there any work you can do, and what is the difference in wages? But the court doesn't just look at what you earned in the past, it also looks at your earning capacity. That is your ability to earn wages in the future, promotions, additional education. So my Legal Lines tip from me, Locke Meredith, to you is make sure you know your rights when you're presenting that lost wage claim.
This has been Legal Lines Tips.
Hello, welcome to Legal Lines. I'm Locke Meredith. I'm very pleased to have on the show for the first time Betsy Irvine. She is a website developer and designer. Betsy, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you.
Let's kind of dive into the security component of this real quick, because we were discussing, you sat in on the last show I just taped with Jason on information technologies and security concerns. How are you seeing websites now being a source of a security concern for an individual?
People are hacking websites now.
So why would they do that? When they're hacking them, what is their purpose?
Their purpose is to take the popularity of the website to their advantage, so they're redirecting the website to another site. It could be somewhere to sell something, it could be pornography, it could be any number of things.
And in fact, you told me recently some young
Yes.
children were redirected.
There were 2 children's websites for a police department, and they redirected it to porn. And the way that it started, at first it started just on mobile, so they didn't notice it at first, but then it took the internet
Just kept
version
growing.
too. Yes.
Holy moly. So their sole goal is to basically steal the customers or the traffic to that site and send them to an alternative site.
Yes.
Something I never thought about. So how do you protect against that?
Well, if the website has a content management system, it is more vulnerable to a virus because there's a database behind it. Any kind of database is a vulnerability. So what it does is it goes in through the back door.
So I know, for example, you helped develop our website for sure, and help us protect ourselves from a security standpoint. You insisted we get malware.
That's true. I insisted on the malware protection, which is not foolproof, but it does help.
Okay.
And then I also installed backup software within your website environment that will back it up every day. So if the malware protection fails, then at least we have a working copy that we can restore it from.
So the malware is to try and protect them from coming in the front door, ever getting to the site and redirecting, but if they're successful, the backup's available to rebuild the website more easily.
Yes,
Excellent.
and you also have 30-day backup within your hosting environment too.
All right, so let's shift gears real quick. So explain to folks, I want to praise you and honor you in the fact that you served in the military.
Thank
and that's
you.
wonderful. And graphic design is,
Yes,
I think was.
I was a yeoman.
And then you've now been in this business of website development and creating design websites for 25 years or so.
Yes, I started before the internet with graphic design and then worked my way into web design.
And actually have handled all kinds of clientele ranging from government down to mom and pop.
Yes.
And I think you've indicated to me that you worked for the largest ad agency.
The top interactive agency.
In the United States.
Yes.
And your customer base is all over the U.S.
Yes.
Okay. So you got a lot of experience dealing with this, and you've seen it grow from its infancy to where we are today.
Yes.
Fascinating. And boy, has it grown.
It sure has.
So talk to me about, let's say, I know in our discussions we've talked about the purposes for having a website. And of course, the reason anyone is going to set up a website is to communicate. I mean, they're putting information out there and they're wanting some other human being to read it. Now, the reason they want that communication and relationship to develop can be just to try and encourage them to educate themselves on an issue or adopt their protest or whatever, or sell a service or a product, right? Okay. So let's kind of focus on the sell something. How do they go about it? Let's say somebody comes to you and they say, look, you know, either we don't have a website or we have one and it hasn't been updated in 10 years or even 5 years. What do you do?
I get a lot of customers that have an idea and they're not very technical savvy, and so they need help in all areas. And the first step is really just deciding what to name the company. Seeing if the domains are available, seeing if there's any trademark on those domains and the name, and if not, then roll with that and see how that would play in their industry.
Okay, and you've used a term that is technical in the sense that it's domain name. Not everybody's going to know what a domain is. What is a domain in the computer world?
Like www.yahoo.com,
okay.
And you definitely want a .com.
Okay, and that is more popular than the .net or
yes.
the .org's alternatives?
Because people assume it's going to be a .com, and if it's .net, they may be trying to go to .com even though they didn't read that it was .net, so .com is definitely the holy grail.
Okay, and so the domain is basically the access port to your website?
Yes.
Okay, and so preferably you want a website domain name. Why? That's the same as your business for what purposes?
Because it needs to all match. It eliminates confusion, and it helps with keywords too. So if you're Acme Brick and you have a domain name that is Oklahoma Brick, that doesn't really jive.
So it's a part of the big picture of trying to communicate what you do.
It's about your brand.
Okay.
Everything needs to be consistent.
Okay. So you get the domain name, you hadn't been reserved or used by anybody else. How do you protect it? How do you get it? How do you save it and keep it?
Generally, I will buy it for them because they're a little intimidated about how to do all that. So I'll buy the domain, I'll set up their web hosting, and the way that I explain it is the domain is like your address, and then the hosting is like your mailbox where all your stuff is stored. So I'll set all that up, find out what kind of email addresses they need, set all that up, get it going, and then from that point, then we move into design phase.
Okay, you mentioned a hosting. There are multiple companies that host.
Yes.
And I know they do it for varying periods of time. What do you recommend?
I recommend going with a big company that has 24/7 tech support and is not going to go down.
And they do it for long periods of time, I assume.
You can pay by the month, you can pay by the year. It's up to you.
And you can reserve the name. Can you pay the fee for the next 10 years now?
Yes.
So that
it's a
you
good
know you're
idea to
protected?
purchase it for 10 years because that gives you a couple of little points on the search engine.
And also the reason I've read stories where McDonald's or somebody didn't go get their domain name, decided they wanted it, didn't have it, and they had to go pay somebody $1 million to get the domain name, right?
Yes.
Okay, so very important to protect the name that you've decided is integral to your business or service, all right? You mentioned you set up email. What is the purpose of that?
So that they can have a custom email, like you might want LOCKE@LOCKEMEREDITHLAW.com. Well, they don't need to have a Yahoo email address, you know?
So again, just consistent presentation
Yes.
of your
One more
information.
chance to brand your company name.
Okay, so you've gotten the domain, you've reserved it, you've protected it, you've got the email associated with the domain name. Now what's the next step?
Then we move into design phase. If I'm doing a logo for them, that's generally the first place I start because the way that looks, the colors, the fonts, determines everything going forward.
Interesting. Okay, so it's like picking the colors, what you're going to paint a house?
Right.
Okay, and the logo is, I guess, a way of branding.
Yes.
You're communicating yourself, I guess, in a very succinct, quick way. Kind of like everybody knows about Coca-Cola or the McDonald's Golden Arches and all that bit. Okay, so you do the logo, then what?
Then you start mocking up the website, gather information from the customer, exactly what are the goals, help them write copy, what kind of links they're going to have, put all that together into some sort of a mock-up that they can see, and then make changes if necessary.
All right, we'll continue this on the next segment. This is Locke Meredith Legal Lines. We're talking about a website design and development. We're speaking with Betsy Irvine, and we'll be right back.
It's time now for Legal Lines Tips with your host, Locke Meredith.
Hello, I'm Locke Meredith, and I have a legal lines tip for you. Remember, knowledge is power, and I want you to know if you're injured, Louisiana law grants you a variety of claims to make sure you're fully compensated. It's generally chopped up into several categories, the first being general damages. That's going to compensate you for your mental and physical pain and suffering, your scarring, disability, functional limitations, your loss of enjoyment of life. Also, it will compensate your family, frankly, for your loss of affection. It's called loss of consortium claim. Next category is specific damages. Those would be, say, for example, past and future lost wages, past and future medical expenses. You also have a claim sometimes for what's called punishment damages or punitive damages, typically only available when you're injured by a drunk party. Finally, you're entitled to legal interest from the date you file your lawsuit until you're paid and court costs. So my legal lines tip to you from me, Locke Meredith. Make sure you know what your claims are.
This has been Legal Lines Tips with your host, Locke Meredith.